fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Sina Grace boards the mothership to discuss West Hollywood Monster Squad. Now come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Grace. You've been on Vertical Stars Podcast.
Hi, it's good to be here. From the comfort of my home. So
It's totally my pleasure. So I always start off with a question of inspirations. What inspired your love for comics and who your earliest influences?
my so many. That's the problem. I think the kind of like quickest answer off the top of my head is I grew up really loving the Generation X comics, and I loved Chris Bachalo's art, and he kind of like hit this like stylistic sweet spot around the 20s, like up to issue 25 and after, where it was much more like animated and sort of like softer, like less kind of edgy, and that for like a young kid me, that kind of made me be like, I want to draw comics. So that was huge, and I loved his style back then, and then that led into like loving Michael Turner and sort of the cliffhanger artists over there. Sorry, I'm like losing my way already, but I would say like Chris Bachalo, like late 90s, early 2000s, and then same with like Humberto Ramos doing Crimson. That was like when same thing, he hit his sweet spot in the like teens, and I was just like, whoa, what like, this is so cool. I want to draw like this, and I want to tell these kinds of stories. So those are kind of my, I'm sure others have asked you, but I want to know what's your like, what kind of made you be like, oh, I like this thing a lot more than the other things.
Well, I will say that I'm a second generation comic book nerd. So
Mhm.
my father was a fan of comics in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah, so in the 80s when I was like 8 or 9 years old, he introduced me to the Batman, then the Batman movie, and then Fantastic Four,
Mm.
Wolverine. Then I got sucked totally into comic books, and then though it's problematic to state it, Neil Gaiman was an inspiration in the 90s, unfortunately, for what he. My point is, you can't change
Yeah,
what comics you enjoyed in the 90s.
you can't. Yeah, you can't change. I mean, oh my, you're reminding me. I had a dream about him. That he was last night. I had a dream that he was at this comic store doing like an impromptu signing, and people were like, still wanting to get their stuff signed by him, and I just had this thing in the dream where I was like, like I really like Death, the character,
Yeah.
and Chris Bachalo once again. But he's never been like my person. But I grew up loving Joss Whedon, so I've been through
Yeah.
the, how do you reconcile this? But yeah, in the dream, I was just kind of like, I just want to hang back and watch, and it was so weird. He was just trying to act like everything was normal and everything was
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, you can't change like where you found someone, especially if the context of their personal life and sort of actions that hasn't permeated into the
Eh,
mainstream.
exactly. It's kind of funny. Like if you ever were at my house, every wall is like wallpaper with autographs
Hmm.
from comic book people, comic books, movie stars as well. There's tons of autographs all over the wall. And I never got to meet Neil Gaiman, but I bought his autograph that I found that was a certified autograph.
Hmm.
And I had it on my wall as one of my autographs. And after information came out, the autograph was still there. It was on those wall sticky things you stick on your wall. But
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it fell off soon after, and I just had to put it back up. But it's one of those things where part of my brain's like, what I'm saying? It was an important thing, but now I guess once it's down, I'm not putting it back up. I guess it's just how it goes.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I, I've taken my Harry Potter books off the bookshelf, but I'm still not ready to get rid of them. I got rid of her like detective novels, but
Yeah.
those Harry Potter ones, those physical objects like have like decades of, like memories for me being a kid, getting them at the bookstore the week they came out. And but yeah, anyway, this is not what we came to talk
Well,
about.
yeah, I was going to say, as far as Harry Potter, I will say, I love Harry Potter, and I saw movies with my wife, but yeah, it makes it hard to enjoy the book. At the same time, the way I kind of see it is, what you love, and you can't punish yourself because someone else did horrible things. I mean, they're still yours,
Yeah.
and you still enjoyed them. But as you mentioned, we'll move on. But
Yeah.
to the value of your creation. So you're the writer of a great graphic novel called West Hollywood Monster Squad, and it's from a company called Shirley, which I've never heard of before. but can you tell me about Shirley and why this is the best graphic novel, in the company, and how it all connects with each other?
Yeah, so Shirley is an imprint at Abrams Books, much in the same way Skybound is an imprint at Image Comics or Shadowline is an imprint at Image Comics. And the Shirley line is curated by writer Mariko Tamaki. So, like, she works with a handful of editors there, Lauren White Jackson and Charlotte Greenbaum. Sorry, this is such a nerd talk, but I'm just making sure I say everyone's names because I love them so much for helping make this book what it was. But they basically kind of curate books that are definitely like LGBTQIA plus, like they're queer, but they're not necessarily any one kind of story. Like I think they won a ton of awards for Far Flung from Space, which is this nonfiction-esque book about Patricia Highsmith and when she just got started, when she was actually working under Stan Lee at Marvel. And she's a really problematic person. Like she's just like overtly like racist. And but at the same time, she's so important for not only like female writers, but queer female writers, and for writing the first like published like lesbian novel that had like a happy ending. Anyway, so it's just kind of like I think their vibe is like finding stories and being the space to tell really excellent stories that don't necessarily have to like have a lesson or have to be like perfect. That's just my interpretation of it. But I went with them for this book because I knew that this is a book about basically it's like I wanted to do kind of like an action horror comedy thing, like a Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
I wanted to do like a weird 80s monster romp type of thing. I know Big Trouble in Little China is not that. It's a couple of things. But anyway, Adventures in Babysitting, all these weird movies, and then add monsters to it. And I wanted it to be just like an all queer cast. I wanted to see what would happen when like, the gay kids are involved in an apocalypse. It just was important to me to work with editors that reflected, those personalities and to like make it as special as possible and to make kind of everyone behind the book look like everyone on the book, in the book.
Now, I from my experience being a comic writer as well, I understand how long it takes to make a graphic novel, especially this was, I think, a 160-page graphic novel, something along those lines. So this is obviously was something that you worked on a while ago, completed a while ago, and obviously being how things happen in politics, the book is now the topics are now increasingly relevant to what's going on. Um, does it help knowing that the book has now become even more topical what's going on right now and what's being avoided, or is that something that now becomes an added way to a book that you want that's meant to be more fun, exciting horror?
It's well, the big thing for me as a person, as like someone who's trying to tell stories, especially if it's going to talk about like, sort of the parts of my personality and identity that like are marginalized. It's like I'm a really big fan of telling stories about queer joy. You know what I mean? Like I just don't ever, and this is sort of like a subplot in the book. It's like I don't really want my experience to always be exploited for anything traumatic. I'm lucky in that I think I kind of like exercised those demons or told those stories when I wrote Iceman at Marvel Comics. And and now I'm kind of more interested in sort of like what does like real community look like? What do like complicated characters who still do the right thing, who are, happen to be queer, what do they look like? It on the one hand, it's a bummer that like it's suddenly this book is an act of rebellion. Like how dare all these characters be heroes, and how dare they like walk this earth unafraid. um, but on the other hand, it's really cool that like right now more than ever, while people are feeling the weight of what's going on, here is this book that doesn't carry that, you know what I mean? And they get to be heroes for completely different reasons than social issues.
Now, one metaphor that is introduced really early into the novel by Marvin, as he's talking about Glendora, is the idea of the box. And
Mm-hmm.
because he basically compares living in Glendora to living in a box. And my brain also goes to the idea of the metaphor for people, especially, I guess, I'm sure those who are, and by the way, if I'm ever using a wrong term, please just correct me,
For sure.
queer people, the idea of being stuck in a box that society wants you to be in as well. Is that an intentional metaphor from Gondora to lives as well that the queer individuals are living?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like well, it was funny because like I think we've said this somewhere, but like the one of the earlier titles too was the book was going to be called Box of Monsters, and we were going to really play with that. And I'm kind of glad we didn't. I love West Hollywood Monster Squad as a title more because it's just so much more fun and vibrant, and so much more of an emphasis about like kids fighting a bunch of monsters through West Hollywood. Um, but that was a big part of it. I think for me, it was like I was just trying to get in the headspace of like kids I grew up with in high school who did live in towns like Glendora, um, and and kind of like giving sort of multiple layers and depths and meanings to the idea of like a box or being boxed in. So that was definitely there. I kind of like even in that first page, I think it kind of like tips its hat. Like this can mean so many different things, you know, but for this character, it just means like he needs to like let his freak out.
When you think about the idea of the box as well, do you find or think the box is more self-imposed because of a fear of society, or is it fully the society sticking the individual in the box because of the fear of what would be if we allowed everyone to exist in their own way?
I think both. I think both. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if I necessarily like, you know, cover all of this in the book, but I definitely, you know, I think people, you know, people have their comfort levels, and sometimes you package things in a way people can digest.
Hmm.
I've thought a lot about that, even like with myself and like how I present. It's like I'm like, man, I look like a Disney villain, you know, with this like mustache and the stooped brow, and it's like, you know, and I try to be, you know, the nicest person I can be. And so sometimes it's fun to subvert that, but yeah, you know, to give you a non-answer, yes and no.
No, it's a fair answer. I think the cool thing about was Hollywood a Monster Squad is that the tone is so interesting because like it's such a fun tone, and you have your horror elements, which are sort of like the disaster film. There's this horror of, and almost like the transitioning zombie sphere as well. Because also without giving too much away, I don't know if it gives too much away that the idea of what the monsters are,
Yeah.
without having too much away. And honestly, there's so much humor and offbeat humor, and the boy W.E.B the boy, am I saying it correctly?
Oh, W.B Dubois. Yeah. The
Boy, this is such also such a fun character as well. How fun and how naturally did the mashup of all these kind of different tones, maybe even genres, mash up for you?
So the first 80 pages went really smooth, came really smooth out. I mean, the first draft of the book came out really smooth, and then um I turned it all in, and it was based on a pretty thoroughly outlined document. But then when Mariko and the editors got the script, she called me, and this is advice that like I think like I've gotten recently too, and it's sort of a tough pill to swallow because you know it in your heart. But she called me and she was like, "Look, like those first 80 pages are amazing, and it's a great book." And she's like, and then the second 80 pages are fine. And she's like, and we could give those pages to the artist, and the book will come out, and the book will be fine. And she's like, but she's like, you owe it to those first 80 pages to make the second 80 pages better. And part of it was that like the plot got so serious, it just got so serious. And there was like this weird sort of like not dreary but like post-traumatic epilogue, like that they went
Mm.
through this and they treated it more as a trauma than anything. And there was a kind of there were some other moments that didn't, there was a completely different ending. And you know, I took that to heart, and I walked myself to like a really like cozy sort of weird neighborhood gay bar that has like an actual CD jukebox. Um I just brought my sketchbook and a pen, and uh let kind of the music sort of like take me places. And David Bowie's Starman was playing, right? It's called Starman, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm saying, yeah, and so like that was playing, and I just had this like image of the characters interacting with the monsters in this weird way that like wasn't set up in the plot as it was. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I thought of this other thing. And then I thought of, back to like Adventures in Babysitting. And I
Great
was
movie.
like, how do I, like how do I create something that is just sort of like continuously absurd, while still endearing. And so I just kept coming up with these images and then I was like, oh yeah, like here's how I do it and here's how I do that. And it came, it took a minute, but it is that weird like chemistry of like, okay, it kind of has to like be absolutely stupid, but have so much heart. Um, and I'm glad, like it sounds like you like the book. I love the book. Like it landed where I wanted it to land. And what was really crazy too was the I think that's what's been really crazy is like how Elon Musk has interfaced with our government. uh I did not foresee that happening, and that's kind of like that plays into the ending and plays into some of the motivations, and that all came from I kind of like was trying to bring it back home and be like, I don't want this to be about COVID, but what I do want this to be about is when monkeypox started blowing up, started flaring up, and how effective folks in my community were about sort of like spreading the word, calls to action, and like nipping it in the bud, and that being as a direct trauma response from surviving like the AIDS epidemic. And so that's sort of in there. But again, it's so silly and goofy because it's about these like kids who literally have to stop their fight against these monsters to do an outfit change. Like, and I think and I think all of that is like a huge compliment to the artist Bradley Clayton, who can juggle like serious moments and can juggle comedy and action, and has a really clear style throughout. Like, their style doesn't change to match those tones. And so that's a huge benefit, and that's a huge reason why I think the book like works the way it does.
I think it's very interesting too is the character of Marvin,
Mm-hmm.
who is kind of he's the protagonist, primary reader surrogate as well, but he's a messy dude.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drama going on with Marvin. Some of it feels like it's on him, and obviously he recognizes later on in the story as well that he's maybe being a bit more dramatic than he should be. Some of it is just situational. So, kind of tell me about the use of Marvin as the audience surrogate and kind of how, because usually when you have a protagonist in a lot of stories is that he's obviously 100% in the right, he's good, this is kind of how it goes. But Marvin obviously steps in it a few times where he's acting out more than he should. He's maybe acting towards someone else in a way that's more on him than on them. So kind of go into him as a protagonist.
He was, I mean, like it, I think he like I haven't fought my way through West Hollywood as a monster attack happened, but like I I can see myself in him in terms of like trying to stage manage my friendships and trying to have them go the way I want them to go, and being really like disappointed or angry if it doesn't. And I think that's like I never, while this is sort of geared towards young adults and has young adult characters, I like almost never perceived it as young adult until realizing that like a huge factor of young adult books is like your main character kind of has to be imperfect. And the hope is that it's in this like relatable way that like you remember how you were when you were that age. But yeah, it just comes from like, you know, this character wants a really pure thing, and the way he goes about it is a little selfishly, and like um and you would hope that it's like it all comes from because he's in this like small box of a town, and
Hmm.
these were the only like friends he had. I hope you have like compassion for him, but I was just trying to give love to that like to that sort of like feeling you have when you're younger and your friends are your life, and your friends are not like holding their end of this unspoken and potentially like not agreed to bargain you made with them. Like I think a lot about that, like when your friends are your family, they don't, but there's no actual like rule book to that. And they can walk whenever they want because they're not your family. So I love exploring those relationships over and over again. And so it's just like, it was fun to kind of make him bratty and make him this kid who like had so much life to live and like learned like 11 lessons in one really awful night.
But when you think about it, about his arc, how much of it is him kind of getting over himself a little bit, and how is the ability to experience? Because I mean, a lot of it. I mean, obviously, he's in West Hollywood. He's out of Glendora. He is really. I mean, and I mean, I think a lot of us when we go someplace like I went to a concert like in June. I remember it was. By the way, I want to listen to Future Islands, great band. Anyways, and I went there, but you know, you kind of go to the concert, you turn around, and you go home, and you don't really have a sense of anything beyond the little area that you stay to. But and it kind of seemed like he was about to do that too in West Hollywood. Go to see W.E.B Dubois, going to do that, and it sounded like he was going to, you know, basically turn around, go home, and that's going to be his day. Because of what
Yeah.
happens though, now he really has to spend time out there in the world outside Glendora, and I kind of feel like that is kind of his where the arc happens. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like exposure leads to evolution. And I think that that was the sort of like thing I did not get to earlier or didn't remember earlier. But it's like, the whole thing is like evolution is a good thing. Change is hard, but change can be good. And you see that manifest in different ways in the book. And I think like you brought up a really good point, and that's why I love like that Hal character
Hmm.
because like you don't treat those people like real people when all you're doing is coming in, getting your interaction or getting your experience you want and walking away, and suddenly
Hmm.
there's like love and flesh to the city that wasn't there before.
And like I said, I think there's so many cool things, and obviously the character, a great story has that character. Like I don't know if this is a great example, but I'm going to use an example. Jurassic Park. Ian
Mhm.
Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum is that character. He's not the main character, but he's the one that steals the show in the movie. I mean, every great moment of him on screen kind of makes the movie. I kind of feel like W.E.B. Du Bois is the character in your book. He's, not the main character, but steals the show when Du Bois. I'm gonna just she's correct.
Yeah, she's good. Yeah, she's right. She's correct. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure.
With 90% of drag queens, she is it, and then drag kings he. But yeah, she is a okay.
Okay, okay, perfect, perfect. At least, and she, like I said, she's a fun character. What, when you think about her within the group, what do you think Marvin could learn? Because originally he very much held her in very high esteem when before he met her. This is going to be, she's the absolute pinnacle of the scene that he wants to exist with, as it were. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think he ultimately learns from her? Does he learn more from her not being what he expected her to be, or from learning from her just what she is?
I don't know if I mean I know I have to have the answer because I made it, but I think I think it's a little bit of like he learned like you can't project how like some like it's like this thing with like parasocial relationships. Like you really can't project how that person makes you feel without them even knowing who you are
Hmm.
and kind of needing to like brace yourself for taking them where they are. There is a lot of like that happens a lot in the book in terms of just like your heroes are humans. And
We hit on earlier in the show.
yeah. And so I think it's just a little bit of that like he put so much on her that she didn't ask for, and then similarly it's like she's got her own stuff going on. And I don't know, I just yeah, like I thought that was like fun to sort of have that. And I liked yeah, I liked that you just wouldn't, you never know what's going on with other people. And this is maybe like less like scholarly than I'd like to admit, but even part of that was just like, there will be people where you just make so many assumptions of their silence or their moods. And it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you at all. And you find out, and it's like, oh, I remember there was something, and like I hadn't heard from somebody, and I was mad about something, and it just turned out like it's like they were dealing with like an injured family member and having to like be the go between that family member and other family members. So yeah, they didn't get around to my text message, sending them a meme or whatever, and I like to give space for that because I do think we all make assumptions with people and their relationships. Now this is just personal, but it's like, you see someone post an Instagram story, you think they're on their phone, but it's like, man, you don't know what the fuck they're doing.
So when you from Marvin's perspective, let's go towards the end of the story, okay?
Hmm.
Do you think Marvin feels that he was better off not knowing who Du Bois really was, or do you think finding out that who she really turns out, as an individual, was actually turns out? 'Cause there's a point in the story, at least how I interpret it, where he's like, "Shit, I wish I had not met her." You know what I'm saying? Like, because he could find, and then by the end, do you think he finally felt, now that I have met her, even though she wasn't what I wanted, I still was happy with what I met.
Yeah, well, I think he got to find the way to tell her how important she is to him. And so for people who haven't read the book yet, like the whole thing is him and his best friends go to West Hollywood to see their favorite drag queen who has not yet made it onto TV, but is rumored on Reddit to be on the next season of this drag TV show. And they meet her, and she's kind of an asshole. But she ends up being a part of their night as they survive, this monster takeover. And there's, towards the end, there's like a real vulnerable moment and a vulnerable exchange between the two of them where she sort of talks about like what's going on in her life and why she was in a bad mood. And how she feels boxed in, you know what I mean? And so Marvin is finally able to kind of tell her, and this is without any spoilers, he's like, okay, do you hear yourself? Like, me and my friends hinged our entire last hangout as a friend group around seeing you. And like, you're not even on TV. Like, do you hear how amazing you are? Like, do you hear like what you've done for us and like how you've made us, like how you've made people happier and closer? And I think like, that's all he wanted, but all he did in the moment, because especially when you ever go to a drag show, it is very transactional. It is very like, oh my God, I only have 2 seconds with you because you're walking off the stage or you're doing this or something. Or if you're at a drag con, it's like you're literally waiting in line for a picture. So you don't always, you have to really assert yourself if you want to say that to somebody. Because you usually don't get that chance. You're usually just like, thank you. And so I think, yeah, I think all told, Marvin is happy that like he had the night go the way it went, because he did get to tell her how important she is, and she got to receive it, which was such a beautiful interaction for me. To write. That sounds so stupid, but it was like nice to see your characters get there.
Yeah. I think there's a line that she says too that I want to kind of pick your brain on, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So this is the line. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, you can correct me because I was, my speech thing. But anyways, she says a quote. This is a quote from her. Commodifying her identity is a reductive move. Can you kind of deep dive into what she means by that? Because that's very interesting phrasing of commodifying.
Yeah, I think, it's like it gets a little bell hooksy, even though this is a commodity itself. It's a book. But I just think like exploiting vulnerable parts of your identity for someone else's benefit, for entertainment, for, for a TV show. Some people are fine with it, and some people that's cool, and other people it's like, I don't want to be reduced to that. Like, she's an artist, you know what I mean? She is a drag queen. Like, she wants to be known for accomplishing so much with like hair, makeup, and costuming and performance art, not like, what happened when she grew up in Alabama or something like that. And so it's one of those things that I think people are coming up against. Like, I even have a drag queen friend in Portland who is like amazing. Like, it just does these crazy things with like face paint and design and costume design and all this stuff. And I'm just like, have you ever thought of being on the show? And they're like, no, because drag is so special to me. I don't want to mess that up. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people do point to it and think like, oh, it's just a person up in exaggerated, gender expression. And sure, it can be that, but it can be so many other things. And I just kind of wanted, again, back to like expanding what these stories are. I just kind of wanted to tell a different story and bring a different drag queen into pop culture, you know, one that just sort of had a completely different story to tell and was a little salty about it too.
Like I said, she's the character that kind of like the Ian Malcolm of your story, where it just kind of grabs you when she's on, because with how she is. Like I said, going back to a little bit, we talked about the antagonist of the story without giving away too many spoilers. As you mentioned, the idea and the of Elon Musk and stuff going on. My understanding though is your initial version of the idea, because this was written pre-Musk and how this all turned out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, is that representing more of Hollywood instead of what we would now? Because right now, I think nowadays when we think about the billionaires, we think software, like computer type people who are destroying the world, those kind of billionaires. But I feel like we're talking about the Hollywood commodifying of or what they originally were doing.
Yeah. I think for me it was still it kind of trying to remember what specifically, but like I, you know, without a specific example off the top of my head, I just think it reminded me so much of like the idea, okay, so like when the reader finds out how and why these monsters are being made, you know, like it's a little bit like it could have been stopped, you know, without telling too much. Like it could have been stopped, it could have been prevented. And the characters realize that like the parties involved didn't care because they just were like, okay, like it just needs to go a little bit longer and
Hmm.
then we'll have what we want. And you know, yeah, I guess even like the idea of let's talk about Severance. Obviously, I like wrote this before Severance season 2 came out, or even, you know, I started this before Severance season 1 was on the air. But like,
Hmm.
you know, just the idea of like, oh, well, we'll set like this is a thing that like society does. It's like, oh, we'll sacrifice these people to figure out this thing, and it's okay. Like, it's okay because come on, think about how much happier everyone will be when we figure this thing out. And I know there's better words around this, but it just was like drawing upon that and kind of that level of greed and knowing that those people would exist and would like celebrate themselves.
Hmm.
I just, you know, it's like we could point to like 7 other things and it'd be like, yeah, that, you know, and time. And I think too, it's like, you know, it's like where, you know, where are these people when the queer community need them? They'll exploit the queer community, you know, but where will they like heed the queer community's call for help? Um, and that was sort of really what I was trying to get at is like, no, they won't. Like, they won't.
Now, like, so I was wondering, and like, feel free to correct me if I'm on wrong on that. Is the idea because obviously Hollywood, and one thing Hollywood is, especially if you're in the conservative world, and I'm going to use the term that's used, is woke. Let's say woke, which I actually do like the term personally, because like for what it means. Is the session though that Hollywood is they're wrong and that Hollywood's not doing it to be socially conscious as much as doing it to sell the idea of being socially conscious.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to pin it all on Hollywood because it's like to me, it's like, you know, people were complaining years ago before the DEI rollbacks, but people were complaining about Target, you know, basically pushing hard on Pride Month and Pride merchandise, but then having like really terrible sort of behind the door ethics and relationships with that community and with the politics around it. And so it's just the thing of that, like where it's like, oh, you want our money, but that's all we are to you is money. And I think that that's like, but that's just every, you know, that's just like every industry. I don't really want to like entertainment is like that too, but it's not fair to just pin it all on Hollywood. Like I think everyone follows the dollar signs, and that's what coming up in a capitalist society is about. Like, you know, yeah, it's like, yeah, you're right. We'll see how many Pride collections there are this June, but
So also when you think about without getting once again we're going to avoid spoilers, with Hollywood Monster Squad, um, is there sequels?
as of right now, I don't think so, but I kind of like I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead because it's just so happy and so good. Um, if it, I mean, it has been doing well. We're now a USA Today bestseller.
Nice,
It's never
congratulations.
happened to me. Yeah, that's really cool.
Congratulations.
I know it's really cool, but yeah, this is one where I've never thought about what happens next. Even the epilogue was like they would have been so far removed from the monster aspect. I think if I did do a sequel, these characters would be sucked into another kind of insane genre action horror. It wouldn't be Magenta Monsters. Like, it's sort of like, that will be done. Like that was squashed at the end of this, or maybe not, or we go full Jurassic World. Uh, and like they're like it's like we're really fucking stuck with this. But as of right now, it just feels so like tight. Like I did in 2023, I did a Superman graphic novel called Superman: The Harvest of Youth, and that was one where like, oh man, like if ever DC is like, hey, do you have another idea? I could spend like years living in teenage Clark Kent's mind. I just been like, and then this happens, and then this happens. But with Marvin, I don't know. I just want him to have a happy ending. I don't want to put him through any more trouble. Sorry, spoiler alert. He at least survives.
Thinking about it, and the title Monster Squad, it kind of feels like one of those things where like trying to think of an example where so like Batman Begins, where it ends with Batman has now begun. You know, because the whole movie is getting to that point. I kind of feel like it ends with them as the West Hollywood Monster Squad, and now
Right.
story after that. Now that they're there.
I mean, yeah, there's always, listen, people will always come up with reasons to create monsters, so they might as well be the ones fighting them.
So where is the graphic novel available?
It's available at all bookstores, at comic stores. You can get it on Amazon, as much as I just talked about, like, hey, F the corporations. I mean, like, at the end of the day, if Amazon hears this book is a big deal, that's great. So, but yeah, you can get it anywhere. And please do, because I'm really proud of it, and I want it to stick around, and I would love to like play with those characters in a different way. Like I would love to make like trading cards and
Hmm.
maybe even come up with like some weird side quest that exists within the story itself. But yeah,
Like I said, I think you did a great job with it. Mr. Grace, it was an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. And you come back anytime to talk about whatever you're working on.
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great night, sir.
You too.